Hello and welcome to my little trip down road testing memory lane. More Q&As today, and they just so happen to be all about riding tips. Now I think we're all searching for that perfect little nugget of advice that's going to make our riding better, as I am as well. You know, that's one of the things that keeps us interested and excited and fascinated about riding motorcycles, isn't it? It's that kind of quest for constant improvement. You never quite master a motorcycle, and you know the ways to do it are so different. You know, you can attack it from so many different angles, and you know, just get a lot of pleasure from that. You know, even with the amount of miles that I do, I still get a buzz from, you know, taking that perfect line through a corner, or you know, braking properly, or anything like that. It's just, you know, I've slowed down a lot in my old age, but I still get a thrill from, you know, the accuracy of riding. Perhaps I don't get out enough. But anyway, let's crack on with the first question, which is from Zephyr White 6373. Thanks very much for your question. Thank you for all these great videos. Thank you, and please keep them coming. I'm relatively new to riding, doing normal riding and occasionally do track days. I recently saw a video of Fort 9 doing the police bike course and also consulting with one of my instructors. What I came to understand is that this is very safe on the public roads. As someone who rides a lot, what is your opinion of this style of riding, and will it affect my track day riding? As I understand there is some fundamental difference between these two riding styles, or maybe my understanding is wrong. Just wanted to know your thoughts. Well, thanks very much for your question. I've got a couple of these, and another one's from RLW85. Thank you for your question. I've just watched Fort 9 video, and in that video it was on about counterbalance with your body when cornering. Is that really a thing or made up? Well, thanks very much for your questions. It's not made up, it's definitely a thing. And that's Ryan from Fort 9. He makes some great videos which I really enjoy, as I'm sure a lot of other people do, because they get millions of views. Really good and really well produced. And the video that you're talking about is where he spends a little bit of time with the police in America and learning how to do the police style of riding. And I'm sure you've seen videos. They're kind of like Gymkhana style riding, where they take these massive, great big Harleys or old Honda Goldwings or whatever through slaloms. And the way to get round is to basically ride in a completely opposite way as you would do if you were Marc Marquez around a racetrack. So instead of hanging your body off to the inside of the bike, they hang their body off to the opposite side of the bike. So as they're going through cones, they're keeping their inside arm dead straight, kind of like a supermoto or what a motocrosser would do. And as they're leaning their bike one way, they're leaning off the other way to counterbalance. And that works well. That obviously is a style, and it works for the police. And it will work on the road as well. I mean, if you're going very, 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 very fast, it has its limitations. But for normal riding, for normal road riding, even swift riding on a decent bike with decent tyres, you're not going to have any problem with that style of riding. And of course, you know, motorbikes haven't changed from day dot. They've always been an engine in a frame, two wheels, some handlebars and somewhere to sit. And although technology's got better, tyres have got better, engines have got better, chassis have got stronger, there's electronics to help you out, you know, the way a motorbike goes around the corner hasn't changed. And you can ride it any way you want, really. I mean, you know, if you look at the evolution of racing, you've got the Mike Hailwoods of the world that just stayed dead in line with the bike as they went round the corner. They just went round like this. Then you've kind of got during the 70s, late 70s, when the likes of Kenny Roberts were hanging off the bikes to keep the bike more upright in the middle of the corner, so they weren't riding on the edge of their tyre. That kind of evolved into the Kevin Schwantz Mick Doohan style, where they'd hang off, but they'd sit over the bike. They'd kind of sit the wrong way, if you like, but they still have their bum off. So that's what kind of gave Doohan the twisting riding style. And the reason they did that is because they wanted to be on top of the bike to control it if it was to slide. That kind of style kind of stayed through the 90s. If you think of Troy Bayliss, he rides very kind of upright and twisted. Neil Hodgson, and I think Bayliss did a World Superbike race, didn't he, a couple of years ago, and he looked really strange, sat right upright when everyone else is hanging off. And as tyre technology got better, then riders started to hang off more, so they could use the corner speed that the tyre grip would give them whilst not running out of ground clearance. So the kind of style that we talk about a lot, MCN, and that you're taught on track days, is to have your inside elbow bent and not straight, so you're kind of leaning over with the bike. So if you just talk about it purely on track first, because you really got to think about your riding style if you're carrying a lot of lean for a long time. On the road, your riding style is very, very subtle. You're never moving on the bike really. You're just making subtle movements with the top half of your body, maybe with your feet, maybe with your arms. But if we talk about the track, so based on my experience racing, being with Simon Crafar when he developed his Moto Voodoo riding project, and 8 years instructing at the Ron Haslam Race School, the way we would have our body in the middle of the corner would be to have our inside elbow bent and leant right over the front and pushing the bike away. And that's got many advantages. It means you can keep the bike more upright in the middle of the corner, so you're not riding on the edge of your tyre. You can carry more corner speed with more ground clearance, and because you've got your elbow bent, you'll hunch right over the front of the bike. And being right over the front of the bike is going to help you load the front tyre going into the corner. It's going to give you more feedback through the front end as the tyre grip comes up through the fork legs, through the clip-ons and into your hands. And then on the way out of the corner, as you're accelerating, you'll hunch right over the front of the bike. And on a powerful bike, that means the bike's not going to wheelie. When a lot of road riders come to the Haslam School, they're sitting quite upright, and a lot of them have got straight arms. So the disadvantage there is that the front end's a long way away, and they haven't quite got the confidence to run into the corner and develop a kind of a riding technique, which I'll come on to later, which is off throttle turning. So you're letting go of the brake, and then not letting go of the brake, letting go of the throttle, and then turning in. You need some weight over the front to be able to do that. And the riders are running out of ground clearance really, really quickly because they're carrying so much lean in the middle of the corner. You can follow a rider that's scraping their toes and pegs, and you're almost completely upright, and they've got straight arms and you've got bent arms. So it's kind of safer. It's kind of safer. So the road riding technique is an evolution of the track riding technique. So it's not about hanging your body off in the corner. It's about leaning forward a little bit and keeping your arms slightly bent. Now, while you can do that kind of police kind of Schwantz style, and it's very, very effective, it's effective for making fast changes of direction where you haven't got time to kind of properly hang off. You can just push the bike down. It's really, really nice and easy. That technique's really good on a big, heavy bike. If you're riding like a big touring bike in Europe somewhere, and you've got a lovely mountain road and you've got nice hairpins, you can just force the bike on its side by pushing it down with your inside arm straight. So that really works. For longer, faster corners, I would prefer to have my arm bent a little bit and pushing the bike away, just because you're more upright. And also when you're more upright, when you come to accelerate, you're pushing down on the rear tyre as you accelerate, and it's gripping. With the bike more leant over, you're pushing it, you're scooping it sideways, and it's more likely to let go. And the other thing is, although you can ride straight armed, and I do sometimes, like I was saying in those instances, riders generally feel more comfortable when you suggest to them to bend their inside arm, and they can flow with the bike more. You know, that's normally a eureka moment on the track. As soon as you get a rider to bend their inside arm, all of a sudden they're smoother and more confident, and their body flows with the bike rather than going opposite to the bike. So, you know, both of those styles work. You can get away with both of them absolutely fine. You know, as the police in America have shown, that's good. As Schwantz and Doohan shows, that's good. But generally, for kind of normal riders like us, if you're leant slightly forward into the corner with your inside arm slightly bent, you'll find it more comfortable. But, you know, there's loads of ways to skin a cat, as they say, and you can do either. But that would be the way I would suggest, and that I've seen people improve with that kind of more inside arm bent kind of thing. But no, that's a really interesting couple of questions, so thank you very much. Right, next one is from Fly876. Thank you for these amazing Q&As. You're the ones asking the questions, so thank you. To further explore lefts versus rights, I thought I was better at going left than going right because of my left chicken strip being smaller than my right one, always. Yes, without further reopening that debate, I had a lot of chicken strip comments over the past month. I got my first, second, third knee down on my right side to the point that I've never gotten my knee down on the left turns yet. Maybe a body position thing like you mentioned. I mostly have struggles with throttle control on the left side. As the right side, I can naturally grip better with my bending arm. Thoughts? Very interesting. So, the people that struggle to get their knee down are normally carrying, ironically, too much lean because they've got their inside arm straight. There's that inside arm again. When you're trying to get your knee down, rather than reaching out with your knee as you're leaning off the bike, you want to be reaching out with your shoulders, head and arm. And when you do that, your knee will naturally go down. If you kind of ride twisted and put your knee down, you need loads and loads and loads of lean. So that kind of follows. You've got a small chicken strip on the left where you've got lots of lean, but you've got a straight inside arm. And it's hard to get your knee down because you're reaching for it. And on the right side, you've got a bigger chicken strip because you've got a better body position. You've got your arm inside, bent inside. You've got the bike pushed away from you, and you're kind of reaching out with your head and shoulders. And that's kind of knee down eureka. But it's interesting what you say about throttle, because I kind of touched on it earlier then. On track, the way into a corner, which is kind of opposite to the road, is off throttle turning. So you're coming down the straight, you full throttle, then you come to brake, and then as soon as you let go of the brake, you don't need to touch the throttle until you get to the apex. So you're kind of coasting all the way to the apex. In a racing scenario, you're actually braking all the way more or less up to the apex, but you're off throttle. And the advantage of being off throttle as you turn in is the bike just turns really, really easily. You're not putting any pressure on the tyres. The bike just wants to turn. You can pick up a little bit of trailing throttle just to balance the bike as you're getting close to the apex. But a road technique, which you kind of have to do on blind corners, is that you'll brake and then power through the corner. So you're going through the corner on the throttle, which is fine. And it's safe because if you need to make any changes to your line or your speed or anything, you can just chop the throttle and you're not going too fast going into the corner. But on the track, if you power through, the bike's not going to turn as easily. You're stressing the tyres, and the bike's just going to want to go wide all the way through the corner. You're kind of fighting to keep it in, and ultimately you won't be able to get on the throttle as hard coming out. So with that hanging off body position on the way into the corner, because you're off the throttle, you don't need to worry about it anyway. You don't need to worry if you can reach it or not, because you're off. It's only when you start to lift the bike up, then you can apply the throttle, and you're kind of closer to the throttle as you're coming out of the corner anyway. So, you know, I've seen a few other comments about, you know, if people are more comfortable on lefts and rights because of what they're doing with the throttle. Well, that zone between letting go of the brakes and the apex of the corner should be off throttle anyway. I mean, Simon Crafar always used to do a thing when he was instructing to demonstrate that point. And if you go and have a look at Simon Crafar's Moto Voodoo videos or CDs, DVDs and YouTube things, you'll see that on the way into the corner, he lifts his whole hand off the right hand bar, goes all the way into the corner to the apex, then gets on the throttle, goes down the straight, then he brakes, and then he lets go of the brakes and he puts his right hand off the bar again. When you're following him doing that, you see him accelerate away from you into the corner, and it's hard to figure out what's going on. You think, how is he doing that? Because he's literally doing nothing. And then you're sort of following him, trying to tidy up the bike as you've gone in really hard on the brakes and it's squirming. Then you're getting on the throttle and the thing's kind of twisting in knots, and he's still there pulling away from you with his hand off the bar. And then, because he's turned so well and turned so tight, he gets the bike upright, gets his hand back on the throttle and goes full throttle down the straight, and then he buggers off or away from you. So, you know, going faster around a racetrack is, on a big bike, is like kicking a football from corner to corner. So you've got your football on the apex, and then you boot it as hard as you can down the straight. And if you bend it like Beckham a little bit, it will land on the next apex. You run up to it, the ball stood still, and then you kick it again down the next straight. You run up to it, stand still, kick it down the next straight. It's the same with the bike. You're flat out down the straights, and then you just almost stop for the corners. Get it around nice and tidy, and then down the next straight, stop. Down the next straight, stop. The temptation is for you to just go fast everywhere on a bike. And if you're on a small capacity bike, you kind of have to do that. But if you're on a bike with some power, kind of 600 and up, then you know you need to sacrifice a little bit of speed in the corner so you can go fast down the straights, and that's where you can use the superpower of your bike. You can't use the superpower of your bike going in on the brakes too hard, or you know, starting the corner off before the apex. It just doesn't work like that. Anyway, I digress from your question. But yeah, so in answer to your question, if you try and mimic your right hand body position to your left, so keep your inside elbow bent, reach for the ground with your head and shoulders instead of your knee. You should get your knee down. And if you kind of develop that off throttle turning technique, you won't be worried about reaching the throttle when it's time to accelerate. So anyway, there you go. Thanks very much for your question. Right, next one is Fatty on a Ducati 8322. Great name. Thanks for your question. Great vid. Thank you. Really interesting to hear you talk about adaptive riding styles due to injury. I had a knee replacement age 23 before my journey with bikes had really began. Determined not to let my injury dictate my passion for sports bikes, I bought a Panigale V4 to use on the track. A few adaptations and it's going really well. I do struggle with my right toe dragging on the floor through corners. Any more info tips on your adaptive riding style would be greatly appreciated. Well, I'm glad the knee hasn't put you off. My knees are buggered from an accident I had when I was in my 20s, and my right knee particular, I can't bend it any more than maybe 45 degrees. It'd be a dream for me to be able to kneel down. I've never been able to do that since I was 24. But anyway, I kind of think that you've bought the right bike. The Panigale V4 has probably got the most leg room of any super bike, pretty much. And it's got a lot of space thanks to the nice long seat and the wide bars. So it's probably the best of all the bikes in your situation. In terms of you know, where to put your knee, yeah, I've kind of overcome even bikes with really squash pegs like Blades and ZX10s used to fill me with horror when I used to ride on my toes, but now I ride with the foot pegs in the middle of my foot, and then keep my toe pushed into the frame, or to the frame, and my heel to the heel peg, heel, what's it? Heel guard. So yeah, so that mid corner body position would be, you know, really concentrating on the head and shoulders and arm right off the bike, inside arm bent, a bum cheek off the seat, and then my foot on the middle of the peg but turned right in, and you end up in a kind of a Vignales kind of riding style, which feels really good as well. So your elbow is the outside of your knee rather than between the bike and your knee. It's kind of on the outside, and you'll never scrape your toes. Even if you ride on your heel, which you wouldn't do anyway, but even if you ride on your heel, you could stop your toe from brushing. So really concentrate on getting the top half of your body off, and turn your toe in, and you won't have any problem with scraping your tootsies. Thank you very much for that. This one is from Justin Zachary. Hello mate. Good day sir, I'm from Texas. Wow. Good day. Oh no, it's Australian. Howdy. I wish I talked proper English. Me too. But anyway, love the channel and your MCM reviews. Thank you very much. My question is, can you explain the difference between countersteering and leaning? Do you do both of these when you enter into a curve? And if you need to go around something in the road and slow speed turning, I guess I'm asking, when do you countersteer and when to lean? Thank you. Have a wonderful day, and please keep doing the videos. Thanks, Justin. That's interesting. So a bike, when it goes from upright to leant over, naturally countersteers. Once you're past maybe 10 mile an hour, something like that, a very low speed, you've got to point the bars in the direction where you're going to steer. But once the bike gets going a little bit, you push the right hand bar for the bike to topple right and turn the bars left. And if you're going around the left, you push the left hand bar and the bike topple to the left. The bike will do this naturally anyway. So if you had a road with lots of very gentle S-bends in it, and you had a bike with cruise control, you can set that cruise control at a speed, maybe 50 mile an hour, and you can get around the corners just by leaning without even touching the bars. So as you lean, say right, the bars naturally flop to the left, and vice versa. So bikes countersteer naturally anyway. And at normal speeds, you don't have to physically do anything with your hands to make the bike steer. You just look where you want to go and then lean, and the bike goes there. So it's easy. The kind of the countersteering thing, where you're actually forcing the bars, happens at a much higher speed, or when you want to, not necessarily higher speed, but when you want to make a real fast direction change or a real positive steering input. So like I say earlier, with that kind of police style riding style, when you're kind of sat on top of the bike, if you're flying into a hairpin on a heavy bike or a cruiser or something like that, then you make a concerted effort to push on the inside bar to make the bike flop into the corner. You know, without it, if you don't really steer much with your hands, then the bike's not really going to go in very positively. So it is a decent amount of pressure on the bars to push. And on track, when you're going fast into a corner, you're counter steering, but especially when you're going through chicanes, when you're making fast changes of direction, you are literally pushing and pulling on the bars. It's a real heavy input. And you know, you can see back in the day, remember those amazing 250 riders, John Kosinski, Max Biaggi, when they're on 250s, when they're in chicanes, as they're accelerating through the chicane, the bikes would wheelie a little bit, and then the pressure they were putting through the bars would make the bars cross as they were going through the corners, and it looked absolutely fantastic. And we also did an interesting thing with MCN a few years ago with the university, and they'd had a project when they were trying to measure the forces that go into a bike when you're riding it on track, and they had sensors all over the bike, including sensors on the bars, so you could see how much they were being pushed and pulled. And it was an 1199 Panigale, which takes some steering anyway, and we were at Donington, and the most interesting stat that came up was down through the Craner curves, where you know you're doing well over 100 mile an hour changing direction. The force you're putting through the bar is a 30 kilogram force when you're pushing that way, pushing that way. So you're kind of like bench pressing 30 kilos on the way down to the old hairpin. That's why riding a bike on track fast is so physical. You know, it looks quite serene, doesn't it, when you're watching it on telly or you're just watching it from the sidelines. But the amount of force you're having to put through the bars is huge, and that's why racers are athletes, isn't it? You know, because they have to do that lap after lap whilst you know, riding on the edge. So for normal riding, if you're not going too fast, it's not really something you really need to think about. Only when you need to make fast changes of direction or you're going fast, you're going to start to need to have to put some input into the bars to make the bike go exactly where you want it to go. But that is a great question. Thank you very much. This is Goose of Norway. Hello, Goose. Thanks for making these videos. Great stuff. No problem. This isn't really about chicken strips, but more about body position. Today's riders hang off their bikes much more than before, scrubbing both knees and elbows. Isn't that to be able to get on the throttle earlier? The more upright the bike is, the more throttle you can apply. That is a good question. I mean, that goes back to, you know, what I said about the evolution of riding styles. You know, it was really, I suppose, you know, the whole elbow down thing, I suppose, started in the Marquez era. I know there are lots of riders that did it before, but, you know, the real kind of, that's when everyone started copying him, isn't it? You know, even journalists. And that kind of riding styles developed from the fact that the bikes have got so much grip in the middle of the corner. If they didn't hang off like that and sat more upright, the bikes would be on the floor. They would just be scraping everywhere and they wouldn't be able to use the corner speed. So that's why they hang off so much. And back in the day, when they didn't have so much grip, they needed to be more in the middle of the bike so they could catch the slide. If you were that hanging off with bad tyres, as soon as it slides, there wouldn't be as much you could do about it. So that's why they ride like that. It's not so much that they can get on the throttle earlier, so they can carry more corner speed. And you know, it's not as if Schwantz never got on the throttle earlier. I mean, he was probably getting on the throttle sooner than Marquez and spinning it all the way out of the corners. But yeah, generally, the more upright the bike is coming out of the corner, the easier it is to get hard on the throttle. Like I was saying, you know, the tyre footprint is slightly bigger when you get off the edge of the tyre. So obviously you've got more grip. But the fact the tyre is more upright and less lent over means you can just put more into the ground. You know, if you're coming out of a corner at absolute full lean, it's just easy for it to slip. So thank you very much for your question. Right. Next one is from John Rushworth. Thanks very much for your question, John. As regards to cornering, whilst I don't ride on the track anymore, I haven't heard you mention foot peg pressure. That's an interesting thing, isn't it? I mean, you can see weight in your foot pegs is a very important thing for riding in all disciplines, you know, from trials riding to motocross to enduro and road racing. For road riding, it's not something that, you know, like countersteering, it's not really something you have to put a lot of time and effort into doing, because, you know, gentle cornering, the bike's going to just go where you want it to go just by kind of looking where you're going and leaning. You don't need to put a lot of pressure in. But as the speeds rise, especially on track, than you are using your feet to steer to an extent. I mean, you see that racers go through the soles of their boots through foot peg pressure. I mean, they're now going through the soles of their boots by scraping them on the ground when they're leg dangling. And foot pressure is important, but equally you see riders don't weight their foot pegs at all when they go into corners. So Johnny Ray, Luke Stapleford, a lot of riders, they actually dangle. Randy Momola used to, because he physically couldn't reach the pegs. On the outside peg, there'd be no foot peg pressure at all. But you know, when you're trying to steer the bike from side to side, you know, through chicanes and stuff like that, you are putting a lot of pressure through the pegs to help the bike turn. You're doing, because a bike just wants to go straight on when it's going fast and doesn't want to turn. All those gyros spinning in a straight line. You've got to really muscle it to get into the corner. So, you know, that's counter steering, that's throwing your body off, and that's also putting pressure on the foot pegs. So foot pressure is important when you're going fast, so you want to make a fast direction change. But, you know, for even swift road riding, it's not really something you've got to worry about too much, because the bike does what it wants to do naturally. But great question, thank you. Right, two more. Great talk, Newsy, as always. This is from the Budget Connoisseur. Thank you for your question. Interesting to hear about your riding style with and without electronic rider aids, especially IMU driven. Oh, that's a massive topic. Electronics on bikes now are the most kind of talked about thing, and the thing that manufacturers kind of celebrate the most with their new bikes. You know, there's a lot of new bikes that have come out in recent years, and the only thing that's changed are the electronics, and that's it. And you know, everything from ABS has evolved to riding modes have evolved that encapsulate all the rider aids. You've got engine mapping that's evolved. You know, whether you like it or not, bikes are intertwined with electronics now, which I don't think is a bad thing. And also I think that people think that electronics do a lot more than they really do. I mean, I've had lots of interesting cases. Bikes have got a lot more grip than you ever give them credit for. You know, you don't go down the road and the back tyre spinning all the time. You need to go some, or do something really stupid to unstick a back tyre nowadays. But we've done a few things. When I was instructing at the Haslam School, for newer track riders, we'd always start with the fire blades on. It's kind of quite an intrusive traction control setting, and as the riders got faster, you give them the choice to turn them down. 9 times out of 10 they wanted them on. They wanted a safety blanket of them on, and they weren't even feeling them, so they probably weren't even using them. Even on the electronics, really intrusive, because the bikes have got so much grip. Even the bikes we were using on the Haslam School's fire blades on sports touring tyres. When I first joined, they were on Bridgestones, and then they went to Dunlops. So even sports touring tyres on track are really, really grippy. I think Leon Haslam did a 130. What did he do? He got into the late 130s on a sports touring tyre on a standard blade, which is just insane. So traction control isn't needed as much as you might imagine, which is why when we're testing bikes day to day, especially on the road, you never feel the electronics. You might feel the ABS every now and then on the road. You definitely feel ABS on the track with Japanese bikes, not so much with the Europeans, because they're really intrusive and they destroy the feeling of the brakes. And we've also done MCN tests in the past where we've invited readers along and, you know, got them to ride bikes with and without electronics, and they've generally wanted their electronics on just as a safety blanket. And in terms of riding any differently, not at all. You know, the correct riding technique is one where, you know, you're not bumping into electronics. All electronics do, I've got experience of this on my racing BMW, is they kind of shortcut, you know, for a normal rider like me. If you're a professional rider, from lap 1 you're trying to spin the tyre, but you know, that's why I'm not there. That's why I'm sitting here doing this video, because I'm not a professional rider in that respect. But having electronics there as a safety buffer shortcuts the time it takes to find the limit of the tyre. And normally when I'm on track, you know, on a Friday practice, I start with the electronics right up. You know, all the manufacturers say that with electronics, you've got to use them. They're there to be used. as a performance aid as well as a safety aid. They're a safety aid on the road, but as a performance aid on the track. So as soon as you start to get used to the feeling of the bike cutting out with electronics when you get on the throttle, and it takes a long time to get there, especially on slicks, then, and also with a race bike, the ignition's cut and the bikes make an audible noise, which is confidence inspiring as well. So once you get used to that kind of feeling of the bike out the corner, then you can turn the traction control down and down and down and down, and you're used to the feeling of it catching you. And then, you know, by the end of the day, you've got your electronics on set quite lightly, but you're riding to the limit of the tyre. So, you know, in that respect, electronics can help. But in terms of the actual riding style and when you get on the throttle, I don't think, you know, riding with electronics should be any different. They're just there to catch you just in case something happens. You know, the electronics, which you can't do without, quick shifters and auto blippers are absolutely fantastic, you know, both for short shifting and going fast on track. Mapping is the big thing nowadays. You know, great mapping will make even the most powerful gnarly bike easy to ride. So yeah, so electronics I think are great. I think it's a bit of bravado when people say they don't need them. I mean, I also race classic bikes with no electronics. I don't ride that any differently because the bike just with modern day tyres seems to have so much grip anyway. It's not really an issue. And even in the on wets, you know, you wouldn't want to ride any differently in the wet because it's all about feeling your way, feeling the grip of the tyre rather than just going bang, because as good as electronics are, you can still crash on them. But that's a really good question. Thank you very much. And yeah, you talk about the IMUs as well. So the IMUs allow slide control. They allow more accurate electronics. But again, you know, I wouldn't just go and bump into them straight away. And finally, from Camelot 57, thanks for your question. Great videos and even compliments on your riding style on the street triple launch of one of your rivals. I think that might have been Al Fagan at 44 Teeth. I don't think anyone stops learning. So do you actually take training from anyone or organisation to keep your riding sharp? No. I think I definitely haven't got all the answers. I definitely don't profess to be the oracle when it comes to riding, because, you know, there's so many different ways to do it. There's lots of people much better than I am. There's lots of people much faster than I am. But I suppose I've got to where I am in my kind of riding career by just being really geeky about learning how to ride. You know, just being a sponge and taking in information from everywhere. You know, just listening when racers talk about how they do it, listening to when police riders say how they do it, when, you know, when I'm with MCM readers, just as much, you know, put all that information in. A lot of it might not be any use to you. A lot of it you might know already, but there might be that little nugget every now and then that you think, oh God, I'm going to try that. And the great thing about riding on the road is that you know, our country in England anyway is littered with corners, littered with places to control your bike, and you can try things 1,000 times a ride. You can just keep on learning and chipping away and polishing your riding. And I think, like I said at the beginning, there's no magic bullet. I just think you've got to keep practicing and keep being interested in, you know, wanting to ride better, and keep getting the advice, and keep looking for it, keep searching for that kind of riding nugget that's going to change your life, really, I suppose. Yeah, and I still do it now. I still watch how-to videos, you know, even the so-called basic ones, because there might be something in there you learn and you didn't know before. Right, I'm all riding tipped out. I hope you enjoyed that one and that you made it to the end. And all that's left for me to say is thanks very much. It's easy for me to say. Thanks very much for watching, and I will see you on the next video.